Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So here in New York today, it is about 17 degrees, which apparently is the coldest it has been in the last 365 days in New York, probably more. It's absolutely freezing outside. I have my heat on blast and I'm filming in my studio where for some reason we get most of the heat pumped through the house, so it is nice and toasty and warm in here, and I literally will not be traveling outside today. But I thought today was a great day to do my recommendations for some great winter horror to read this winter season. So for those of you who don't know, I don't know if I would call myself a mood reader, but I'm definitely really into reading things that fit the atmosphere or time. So in the summer, I like reading more summery reads. In autumn, I like reading like Halloween-oriented reads. And in winter, I really like reading kind of, you know, isolation, atmospheric, moody, cold, wintry, blustery stories. So I've got 5 here today to share with you all. I'm a huge fan of pretty much all of these books. And I've spoken about most of these books on my channel before. So some of these I have read very recently, and some of these I read years and years and years ago, and I still absolutely love and adore. So let's dive in. All right, first up, I don't think I could talk about classic, amazing, iconic winter horror without bringing up Stephen King's The Shining. This is easily one of the best books Stephen King has ever written. It's one of his most famous, if not his most famous. This novel is so iconic and important that it basically gave the Stanley Hotel out in Colorado a new life. It is the reason that the hotel is now open all year instead of closing for the winter like it does in this. Stephen King went and he stayed at the Stanley Hotel and was so spooked by what happened there that he decided to recreate it as the iconic Overlook Hotel in The Shining. I actually just went to the Stanley back in August. I have a whole video on that if you're interested. But let me read the back of the book for y'all. Jack Torrance's new job at the Overlook Hotel is the perfect chance for a fresh start. As the off-season caretaker at the atmospheric old hotel, he'll have plenty of time to spend reconnecting with his family and working on his writing. But as the harsh winter weather sets in, the idyllic location feels even more remote and more sinister. And the only one to notice the strange and terrible forces gathering around the Overlook is Danny Torrance, a uniquely gifted 5-year-old. If you have seen Stanley Kubrick's film, you know right off the bat that this is a classic isolation, stuck in the winter in the mountains alone story. However, this book is absolutely nothing like Stanley Kubrick's film, apart pretty much from like the names of characters and sort of the location. I adore this book. I think it's great. As a huge fan of the Stanley Kubrick film, I do think that this book is absolutely worth reading as well. They stand very well alone, not so much together, but are both iconic for very different reasons, and I can't recommend this book enough. I'm sitting here just rambling and gushing, but The Shining is probably the pinnacle of winter isolation horror. And it's a great ghost story. We always forget that. If you watched my recent December 2021 wrap-up, I spoke about this book. I also have a full in-depth review on this novel that I did in collaboration with my friend Blackacre Doe on my channel. But this is Joe Nesbo's The Snowman. This is, well, in the title, about snowmen. It's also about a very intricate serial killer. So I will read the back of the book for y'all. One night after the year's first snowfall, a boy named Jonas wakes up and discovers that his mother has disappeared. Only one trace of her remains, a pink scarf, his Christmas gift to her, now worn by the snowman that inexplicably appeared in their yard earlier that day. Inspector Harry Holley suspects a link between the missing woman and a suspicious letter he's received. The case deepens when a pattern emerges. Over the past decade, 11 women have all vanished, all on the day of the first snow. But this is a killer who makes his own rules, and he'll break his pattern just to keep the game interesting, and he draws Harry ever closer into his twisted web. So this novel is set in the beginning of winter in Norway. All of the major scenes of this story take place in a very snowy, wintry, cold setting. While this book is not so much about like isolation and being trapped in like the wilderness, like a lot of winter horror tends to be, this very much pushes a narrative forward on not only snow and winter and isolation of Norway, and all kind of like being able to hide under the cover of the snow during winter times. But it also draws a lot of parallels between like the innocence of children and playing with snowmen and building snowmen, and how you can turn something so iconic to childhood and like the fun of winter and make it very, very, very sinister and dark. I absolutely loved this novel. That was a 5-star read for me. The Shining, I believe, was also a 5-star read for me. And I just cannot recommend these two books enough. And very, very polar opposite. One being a ghost story and the other being kind of like crime thriller. Next up, in a completely different vein of horror, we have Let the Right One In by Jean Alvide Lindqvist. This is my favorite vampire novel of all time. It is absolutely gorgeous, disturbing, unsettling, many, many, many things. But it does take place primarily in the winter time in Sweden. I will read the back of the book for you. 12-year-old Oscar is obsessed by the murder that has taken place in his neighborhood. Then he meets the new girl from next door. She's a bit weird though, and she only comes out at night. I love this novel. This is one of the most unique stories I've ever read. Like I said, it is, in my opinion, the best vampire book I've ever read. It's very unique. It's very original. It really tells the story of like the tragedy of the vampire's familiar alongside kind of like the lost innocence of what happens when you turn a child into a vampire. Everything about this book, it's not for the faint of heart. It should have several trigger warnings on it. I've talked about this book a million times on my channel, but it is absolutely stunning. And I think the cold, wintry setting that drives forward a lot of the plot really, really benefits this story as well. Again, you get that sense of darkness and isolation in the Swedish winter that you wouldn't necessarily get in the spring there. So it was very, very fitting for this kind of gloomy, dark, depressing backdrop of a vampire story. Can't recommend this enough, but it is very bleak, very dark, very disturbing, but very beautifully written. And it's one of the best books that I've ever read during the winter. It is a 4-star read for me. That is only because there are some very, very disturbing, uncomfortable scenes in one of the major subplots of the story that I just couldn't give it a 5-star read because I felt so kind of icky reading it. But I do absolutely love and adore that book. Okay, next up is Bone White by Ronald Malfi. This is another novel I have spoken about endlessly on my channel. As you know, I absolutely adore Ronald Malfi's work, and I picked this up thinking that it was like a Lost in Alaska Wendigo story, which it sort of is, sort of isn't. I'll let you read it and decide for yourself what's going on, but I will read the back of the book for you. Paul Gallo saw the report on the news. A mass murderer leading police to his victims' graves in remote Dred's Hand, Alaska. It's the same bit of wilderness where his twin brother went missing a year ago. As the bodies are exhumed, Paul travels to Alaska to get closure and put his grief to rest. But the mystery is only beginning. What Paul finds are superstitious locals who talk of the devil stealing souls, and a line of wooden crosses to keep what's in the woods from coming out. The more he searches for answers, the more he finds himself becoming part of the mystery. So one of my favorite things about this book is the setting in this kind of small town in Alaska alongside the kind of like full barrenness of the Alaskan wilderness. Our main character is kind of equally in both the town and just kind of wandering around the woods around the town quite often. And it's just one of those books where the setting is as much of a character as all of the main characters in this story. It plays up winter and isolation and the disorientation of being lost in the woods, in the snow, in Alaska so well. And I didn't want to put this book down. I believe this was a 4-star read for me. It doesn't perfectly stick the landing, primarily because I just wanted more from it. But it is absolutely beautifully written. The characters are really compelling. And again, the setting of that Alaskan dark winter is just absolutely crucial to this story. And I was blown away. This is the second book I'd ever read by Ronald Malfi, and it was the book that really got me hooked on his writing. And I was like, yes, I see what you're doing. I see how this is going, and I absolutely want more. So I was very upset that the ending just kind of ends wholeheartedly because I just wanted to read more and more and more about these characters and this weird mythology in what's going on in this story, as well as the town. The town is so cool and creepy and bizarre. And I adore this book. Okay, last but not least, I feel like this is another book that you can't have a like great winter horror list without including. I've spoken about this book many times on my channel and I have very, very mixed feelings about this, but this is The Terror by Dan Simmons. I have issues reading this because I think this is one of those books that is really, really hyped up as a book that you're gonna pick up and not want to put down and read, even though it's like 700 pages and there's literally chapters where they just describe how like scurvy works and the inner workings of like 1800s naval boats work. So this book is not for everyone, and I think that is where this book kind of rubs me slightly the wrong way, because I went in thinking this was going to be a very easy, fun read, and it's not. This book is definitely work to get through, but I will say it is worth it. For those of you who don't know, this is the story, this is a fictionalized supernatural story of the HMS Terror and HMS Erebus journey into the Arctic Circle that they never returned from. It's been turned into a TV show on Hulu or AMC. The cover says AMC. And it is both historical fiction and like horror fiction. And Dan Simmons does a really great job with that, but there's a lot of detail in this. And the entire thing is set in the Arctic Circle for the most part, apart from a few flashbacks. And there is a really cool polar bear-esque monster. And it's awesome. But this book is not for the faint of heart. Like, this is definitely one that you're gonna really have to get through some long descriptive chapters to really get to like what makes this book so stellar. I'll read the back for you all. The men on board the HMS Terror, part of the 1845 Franklin expedition, the first ever to use steam-powered vessels to search for the legendary Northwest Passage, are entering a second summer in the Arctic Circle without a thaw, stranded in a nightmarish landscape of encroaching ice and darkness. Endlessly cold, they struggle to survive with poisonous rations, a dwindling coal supply, and ships buckling in the grip of crushing ice. But their real enemy is even more terrifying. There is something out there in the frigid darkness, an unseen predator stalking their ship, a monstrous terror clawing to get in. This book will make you feel cold reading it. It will make you feel cold, hungry, sad. It's very good at playing with your emotions because you spend so much time with so many of these characters who are all based on real people for the most part. I think Dan Simmons does a really, really amazing job of balancing the actual history that we know about who these people were and what they went through with this kind of iconic supernatural being, so to speak. I really, really enjoy the monster in this book. I think it adds a really cool element to the tragedy of the Franklin expedition. And I think Dan Simmons is very, very insightful in all of the stuff that he learned about boats in like the 1840s to be able to make this book as dense but well done as it is. Again, this is not a book that is going to be an easy read. It is a very long journey, and there are so many chapters that explain so many strange things that you don't think you need to really know, but they kind of come back and they make sense later on. I know way too much about scurvy. I know way too much about polar bears because of this book. But this is a really, really interesting story. And I will tell you that they are not trapped on the boat for the whole thing. There's a lot of times where they send out groups that go out on the ice, and those are definitely the coolest parts of this story. Anyway, that is all that I have for you guys today. I really hope you enjoyed these 5 books of winter horror to read this winter season. As always, I post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays. If you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Mwah.